History Talks. Today we continue our series on the Crusades. In this episode, we'll be talking about the Second Crusade. Now, right here, I have an Eastern Orthodox censer. This was sent to me from Greece. So, in the Second Crusade, did the Eastern Orthodox Church work with the Roman Catholic Church?
Yes, they did work together. In fact, part of the idea of the Crusades as a whole was to try to bring the two recently divided churches together. However, multiple disagreements would become apparent during the Crusades that would end up driving the Eastern Christians and the Latin Christians, as they were called back then, even further apart.
Okay, let me just stop you there. So there was... So we can go over this for everybody listening. There was a great schism between East and West, right? And what year did that occur?
1054.
1054. And what year did the Second Crusade start?
The Second Crusade started in 1142.
Okay, 1142. So this was close to a century later, not quite. Yeah. So there had been a major disagreement. A disagreement so large, the church actually split into two separate entities, Eastern and West. And at this point, the church leaders said, hey, we can work together in this battle. We have the same common cause, right? Mm-hmm. Or at least that was the goal. But you're saying, how did it go? Did it work? Did it not work?
Well, first we need to talk about the Minor Crusade of 1101.
Okay, so what is that? What is it? Just somewhere between the first and the second one?
Yes.
Okay.
Shortly after the end of the First Crusade, when news of its victory reached Western Europe, the Pope called for a reinforcement of the Kingdom of Jerusalem and asked the Byzantines to help. In fact, he actually said that anyone who had deserted the Crusade could redeem themselves if they went on this Minor Crusade to, push back the Seljuks a little and reinforce the Kingdom of Jerusalem. However, the Minor Crusade was not a success at all. It had great divisions in leadership. The largest part of the army, the Lombards, they wanted to do their own completely separate thing and capture some random city in northern Anatolia. And most glaringly, the Byzantines, who was already having some conflicts with the Kingdom of Jerusalem over the Principality of Antioch, which both claimed a right to suzerainty over. Their generals weren't too happy with the generals of the Minor Crusade, who just seemed so incompetent to them. In fact, when the leaders of both the Byzantines and the Minor Crusade went back home, they both blamed each other for the failure of the Minor Crusade.
Although you said the Minor Crusade took place in 1101.
Yes.
Through when? How long did it go on for?
It lasted like a year.
Oh, it lasted a year. Then the Second Crusade was in 1142. Mm-hmm. So you have a gap of over 40 years between them. So you have essentially, that's like a generation and a half, roughly. Okay, so it's going to be all new people, but it was still remembered. It was a prior generation or two generations before it went off to the Minor Crusade by the time the Second Crusade started.
Yes.
Okay, and what started the Second Crusade?
So there's one important figure who rose to prominence in that period of 40 years. Imad al-Din Zengi, or Zangi, I've seen it spelled both ways. He was a Turkic warlord who, originally he was just another governor within the Seljuk Empire, but he used his great military skill to create a fairly sizable sultanate. At first it was just, modern-day Syria, but then he conquered modern-day Lebanon, part of modern-day Iraq, and by the end, and most importantly for the Second Crusade, he conquered the County of Edessa. Now, Edessa is very important because it's basically the northern barrier between the Outremer, the Levantine Crusader states, and the Seljuks. It's one of the main forts in the northern Outremer. Outremer being a French word that is generally used to refer to the region, culture, etc. of the Crusaders during the time of the Crusader states.
All right.
So Edessa falls, and no one really likes the Zengids because they are conquering everything. But the Crusaders are especially alarmed because they have lost Edessa, and with the Zengids already swooping in to take down the Fatimids, it's only a matter of time before they strike at the Kingdom of Jerusalem itself. So, the Pope declares a crusade for... Okay, so here's an interesting thing. No crusade target was specified, actually. Instead, the actual bull that spelled out, hey, we're going on crusade again, just said, to expand the presence of the Christian faith, to expand the power of the Christian faith.
Okay.
So, the Second Crusade starts, and the message goes around, and basically there become 3 fronts for the crusade. The classic Levantine front, to reinforce the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the Northern Crusade, and the Reconquista. So, the Northern Crusade is the shortest of these, or the first Northern Crusade is the shortest of these, so we'll start with that.
Okay.
Basically, North German Christians didn't feel like going all the way down to Jerusalem. So instead, one of the bishops said, hey, it's okay. Since the Pope just said he wants to expand Christian power, it's okay if you instead spend your crusading time attacking and converting pagans.
Okay.
So organized by a couple of bishops, the King of Saxony and some other minor lords, they go on a crusade to take down the high chiefdom of Obotritia, or however you pronounce it. Pomerania, basically.
Okay.
They're a Slavic pagan high chiefdom in modern-day North Prussia / Pomerania.
Okay.
Now, the Pomeranians hear about this crusade before the Crusaders finish organizing, so they attack a fort in Denmark, leading to the Crusaders going to that fort and counter-sieging it. The siege lasts a bit before the Prince of the Obotritia says, hey, I'll convert to Christianity and I'll have my army do the same if you leave us alone.
Okay.
So they do this agreement, and the King of Saxony, who contributed the largest horde of troops, said, right, job well done, I'm going home.
Okay.
So now it's just the bishops and their small armies who can't do anything. So the crusade the Northern Crusade ends up mostly a failure because they didn't actually expand anything, and most of the pagans they had converted just went back to paganism after the war ended.
I see. They just said, yes, we'll practice Christianity because there's an army right there. As soon as the army leaves, they say, we didn't really mean it.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the bishops said, it's because we use an army and not missionaries. We should have sent missionaries to the Obotritians.
Okay.
Anyways, and that's the end of that.
Okay. So that was the northern... This is all considered part of the Second Crusade, is that correct? Okay, so that was the northern front. Let's talk about the Reconquista. What happened there?
So, King Alfonso I of Portugal, who back then was in the process of getting Portugal recognized as an independent kingdom and not just a duchy, basically he's like, alright.
Where does this recognition come from?
The Pope.
The Pope, okay.
Right now he's negotiating with the Pope.
Okay.
So he's like, hey Pope, I've heard you're doing this crusade. What if you know how those Germans are doing the Northern Crusade? Let's do a crusade for the rest of Spain, or the rest of Hispania, they would have called it. After all, the Castilians have had some success against the Taifas.
Okay.
So what if we take this big city, say Lisbon and bring it into Christian hands. And the Pope is like, all right, go ahead.
Okay.
And Alfonso has some good luck because there were a bunch of Anglo-Norman crusaders who were under the leadership of this guy called Hervey of Glanville, and they were going to the Holy Land for the Levantine front, but a storm blew them into Porto, which back then was the capital of Portugal.
Okay.
And Alfonso was like, hey, so long as you're here, why don't you help me Reconquista against the Muslims? And
okay.
Hervey's like, all right, let's do that.
Okay.
So they go to Lisbon. The English Crusaders and the Portuguese Crusaders don't exactly get along, but their numbers and leadership are strong enough that within 4 months, Lisbon surrenders to the Crusaders. And part of the peace agreement to let Lisbon go to the Crusaders was that if any of the Muslims wanted to leave the city, they could. And one chronicler wrote, so many people came out of the gates that it was like the entire population of Hispania was packed inside that city and being released. But that's not the only part of the Reconquista. Over in the east, there's a city called Almeria, which is a big-ish port city.
Okay.
And here is where the Italian, namely the Genoese Crusaders, get involved.
Okay. So they have two fronts. They're coming from the west in Portugal, and they're coming from the east in Italy, right?
Yeah.
Both sides are pressing down on the Muslims who are in what is now current day Spain.
Yeah.
Okay.
So first they siege Almeria, which lasts 2 months. The siege was almost unsuccessful because they got a little overexcited and decided to instantly assault the city, which didn't work. It just caused a bunch of Crusader deaths.
Wow. So
they were like, all right, let's think about this. So then they got better siege ladders and then assaulted the city again, and that worked, but there's still a bunch of dead Crusaders, but it worked. They got the city.
Okay.
And after that, they were like, okay, no more assaulting cities. We're just going to do sieges the traditional way.
And what's the traditional way?
Just surrounding the city.
Surround them and starve them?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
why do you think they did that? Were they in a hurry?
One common belief is that they heard about the siege of Lisbon. Were like, yeah, these Muslims are weak. If we just assault the city, then we can be really
I see.
quick.
They underestimated the enemy, and
Yeah.
as a result, paid a price. Okay.
So then they're like, all right, let's take these other cities on the Ebro River. The Ebro being a river that connects inland Spain with the Mediterranean Sea. And there's not too much to talk about with these because all of these sieges were successful very, very quickly. They just surrounded the city, had 200 boats or something ridiculous like that, and the Muslims were like, okay, we can't fight 200 boats and however many men 200 boats carry. Let's just surrender.
Okay.
One interesting thing to note, though, is what they did with the cities after they took them. Because oftentimes what they did was they instituted a system called Alhama, or Aljama if you're Portuguese. So it kind of emulated the previous Muslim system of Christians and Jews paying jizya, but instead of Christians and Jews paying extra tax, it was that the Muslims would live outside the city walls and also pay an extra tax. So that's what the Aljama system was, or Alhama. And they instituted that in all the cities, and that worked to prevent the Muslims from just revolting, because they tried to just kick all the Muslims out of Almeria, but that didn't work. So they let some they let some of the previous Muslim systems exist, but they still had to be loyal to the the Reconquista states.
Okay.
Now we get to the Levantine Crusade, and oh boy. So
wait. So just to recap the Reconquista, was that successful?
Yes.
Okay, so
unambiguously a success.
That was an unambiguous success.
Yeah.
The Iberian Peninsula was claimed for Christendom.
Or part of it. The rest of it would be reclaimed in later wars, but this is the first, really huge victory of the Reconquista.
Okay, and how long was it occupied for by the Muslims?
So, Muslim presence in Spain would eventually last for 6 or 7 centuries.
Mm-hmm. When did it start?
It started in the 700s.
700s, okay. So they had been there for about 400 years at this time.
Mm-hmm.
A significant chunk, including at least 2 major cities, right?
Yeah.
Was reclaimed for Christendom.
Mm-hmm.
The northern front, you said, was in a Slavic territory, which is now part of Russia.
Or now part of Germany, actually.
Oh, now part of Germany, okay. Oh, you said Prussia, not Russia, okay. So it was a Slavic area that is now part of Germany, so I'm assuming that's the eastern part of Germany, right?
Yeah.
So that was what would you call that?
It was not a success.
It was not a success, but there wasn't much loss there either, it sounds like. Sounds like the army just came in.
Yeah.
The Slavs who were there just said to the Germanic Christians, sure, we'll believe in whatever you want. Just go home. And they said, okay, we'll go home.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much it. So it was it wasn't really a win or a loss, it just not much really happened there.
Yeah. The Northern Crusade did have one significant impact. It would inspire further Northern Crusades in later times.
Oh, okay. They came back because they wanted to finish what they tried before? Is that the story there?
Yes, but that's outside of the scope of the Second Crusade.
That's fine. I just wanted to go over what happened. Okay, so we had a Northern Crusade. Nothing much really happened there.
Mm-hmm.
We had a Crusade, a Reconquista in Spain. It was considered a success.
Yes.
Not all of Spain was retaken, but significant cities were.
Yeah.
Then, so we have the Levantine Crusade was the third part of the Second Crusade. What happened there?
So, the main characters you need to understand here are Baldwin, a descendant of that Baldwin, King Fulk, who is the king of Jerusalem, and King Louis VII, who is the king of France. Now, Louis VII was basically pressured by his entire courts to basically either go on the crusade or suffer what is basically political suicide, because Louis VII's reputation up until that point was spending all of his time doting on his wife, Eleanor of Aquitaine, which, to be fair, Eleanor was described as one of the prettiest women of her era, but Louis VII was considered a bit of a softie.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. So people were accusing him of being soft, and they need a king who can lead an army, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're and Louis VII and his advisors are like, all right, if I go on this crusade, I can prove my martial skill. I can prove I'm a strong leader.
Okay.
So he goes with an army of mostly French crusaders to the Kingdom of Jerusalem. They land in they team up with the Byzantines, who at this point have finally vassalized Antioch, and they go to defend a city near the border of the County of Edessa and the rest of the Crusader states. And so there's this fortress, and one of the Crusader leaders is defending it, and he's like, hey, Louis VII, you're here, let's defend the city. And Louis VII is like, that's nice and all, but it seems like you have enough of an army, and you are a good leader. And the defender says, like, well, that's true, but I kind of want your help, please. And Eleanor's like, hey, I'm going to go to Jerusalem, you go work out this whole war thing. And Louis VII's like, hey, let's all go to Jerusalem, we can, we got this city.
Okay.
And nobody likes Louis VII for this, but it's not explicit that he was scared or anything, but he might have been, just scared or nervous or just not wanting to put responsibility on himself.
His reputation as a softie, maybe was accurate.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he goes to Jerusalem, and nobody likes him, but at least the city didn't fall. That's what's important, but still...
Nobody likes him. They don't respect him as a leader.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So much for being king of France.
Mm.
Then the success... And then Nur ad-Din Zengi, the current leader of the Zengids, and his general, some long Arabic name. His name is Ayub, and this may be a little familiar because he is the father of a certain man that some know as Saladin. So yeah, these two people, they failed to take the city, but instead they regroup and deal with some other stuff. So then the Crusaders are like, alright, we have two options. We can either go retake Edessa, or we can go take Damascus. Edessa, I've explained before, it's a former Crusader city that is basically their northern barrier against the Muslim forces, and it's pretty important. Damascus, however, is a larger and richer city that serves as one of the major forts in the north and the south of the Middle East, owing to it being near a desert that's basically inhospitable.
Right.
So they have a choice between those two cities, and Louis VII is like, all right, I need to save my reputation. So after a pretty heated debate between the leaders of the Crusaders, Louis VII convinces everyone that they should siege Damascus.
Okay.
And the siege of Damascus, they start surrounding the city, and then...
Do we know his reasons? You said he had to convince everybody. Do we know what the arguments for and against are, or were?
The arguments for Damascus is that it's a bigger city, so if they did manage to take it would arguably...
It's a larger prize.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the argument that they should take Edessa is that it's easier, it's still very important, and it would ensure that no territory was lost.
Okay.
And it was a much more likely to be guaranteed win.
But Louis won out.
Yeah.
Even though you said he wasn't liked. I wonder why. Did he just have the better argument? Or did he just have the most money?
He had, I think it was the most money part,
Okay.
because he did actually have a lot of money.
Yeah.
Though, sieging Damascus was a mistake. They got a surround on the city before they...
So they aimed too high with that one.
Yeah, before the Zengids basically just wiped them, in the end, the Crusader army was forced to retreat, and the Zengids ended up keeping their control of Edessa, and the Zengids tried to take Acre, but they were unsuccessful due to some of the other Crusader leaders. But this time, Louis VII was taken out of the picture. Eleanor of Aquitaine, she wanted to divorce him because he was a weak leader, and she started to develop feelings for one of the Crusader leaders. Basically, things weren't going well for Louis VII, so he's like, right, I'm going home.
Okay.
So he went home, and by that point, it was basically accepted that the crusade was unsuccessful, and eventually peace was signed, and the Zengids then just said, alright, well, our goal, we just wanted to kind of conquer Egypt, so we're going to focus on that.
Oh, okay.
And that's pretty much how the Second Crusade ends.
Oh, was Egypt part of the Second Crusade, or was that something else?
Egypt was ruled by the Fatimids, who, in between the Crusades, they had a number of skirmishes with the Kingdom of Jerusalem, but they didn't actually fight in the Second Crusade. It was mainly the Seljuks and the Zengids.
Okay. But the Crusaders went home after not taking Damascus, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so in short, the Crusade consisted of 3 parts.
Yeah.
There was a northern part, which we could say was neutral, wasn't really a gain or a loss.
Yeah.
There was a Reconquista in the southwest, which was a success.
Yes.
And there was the Levantine front in the southeast, which was a failure.
Yeah.
So, one up, one down, one in between, huh?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. The most important aftermath of the Levantine front is that it would eventually lead to the fall of Jerusalem. And also it deepened the divides between the Byzantines and the Crusaders. Because I forgot to mention that some of the Crusader leaders were actually Byzantine generals who had been sent to help secure Christian presence in the region. And they did, and Louis VII is Louis VII.
Okay.
And they also were, and remember that Louis VII is the richest of these Crusader leaders, just because France is so big and powerful, and also Louis VII is one of the only 2 kings here, the other being King Fulk, who. Also Louis VII is the first impression a lot of these Byzantine generals get of the Western Christian leadership, because remember, he's the only king he's the only European king, like King Fulk, European descent, but he's been born and raised in Jerusalem.
Okay. All right. So that's a good description of the Second Crusade. Then, did you have any final words you wanted to say about it?
Just the main important thing that occurs between the Second and Third Crusades. Because remember that guy Ayu who works for Nur ad-Din? Well, his son, Sal al-Din, ends up inheriting the Zengid Sultanate, and he is that Saladin, the infamous one.
All right.
And eventually...
And that's who we're going to talk about in our episode of the Third Crusade.
Because he's the one who ends up taking Jerusalem.
Well, we'll save that for our next episode, right?
Yes.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you all in our next episode as we continue our series on the Crusades. All right.
Yep.
All right, good job, Bastion.
Yep.